Dear teachers, welcome to TLS coaching session 9. Today we will see active learning and passive learning, the difference between the active learning and passive learning. Before going into that, we will discuss a question which we have already seen in the TLS pedagogy guide as a sample question paper. So we'll see how to omit the 3 wrong answers and select the apt one. Which of the statements below is the best description of what we call learning style? A. The way in which each learner prefers to learn. B. The only way an individual learns. C. The way the learner prefers to arrange his knowledge. D. The most efficient way for a learner to arrange his knowledge. When we see all the options, and we will be sticking into the last one because it is an bite it is. The most efficient way for a learner to arrange his knowledge. But you have to omit this because the question is about the learning style. It is not about arranging the knowledge. After learning, understanding, then only the person or an individual can arrange the learned content. So here you cannot fall for this question, answer option. And coming to the next way, the way the learner prefers to arrange his knowledge. So here also knowledge is seen, so we can omit this. We have the close proximity between these two questions. The way in which each learner prefers to learn, the only way an individual learns. Here, the correct answer could be the way in which, and the correct answer is the way in which each learner prefers to learn, because a learner might have at least 2 to 3 different kinds or ways of learning. So there may not be any one single way. This option A, the way in which each learner, each individual learner prefers to learn, is called as the learning style. Now we will go for the difference between the active and the passive learning. Active learning is the most appreciated learning method in this 21st century. This is one of the engaged inquiry learning where the teacher cannot be a master of the subject, need not be the master of the subject. She or he acts as a co-learner. Here, the students plays a major role. It involves divergent thinking and it involves developing creative ideas in active learning. Whereas in passive learning, it is a traditional method of learning where the students will be passively sitting and observing what the teacher is teaching. Here, the development of the creative ideas and finding the solution is based on the students' energy level and their intellectual level. The environment in this passive learning is typically teacher focused. Students, as I told you, will be just listening to the teacher and more interaction will be avoided. Passive learning assumes that the teacher is the master of the subject. And students' role in this passive learning is very less. If you see the different characteristics and if you need to find out the difference between active and passive learning, the involvement of the students, if you say, it will be high in active learning and it is low in passive learning. The focus of the learning environment, this is student-centered, this is teacher-centered. The role of teacher here in active learning acts as a facilitator and co-learner, whereas in passive learning, the teacher is the master of the subject. The role of the students in active learning is very high, whereas in passive learning, the role of the student is just receiving of the information given by the teacher. Here, the type of thinking which is involved is divergent thinking. In passive learning, it is convergent thinking. Here, by how the learning is achieved is by synthesis of information. passive learning, the learning is achieved by internalization of the information. So there are advantages and the disadvantages as well here in active and passive learning. We will see the advantages of the active learning. Active learning allows for the frequent feedback, stimulates attention, participation, discussion, develops critical thinking, which we have already seen. Same with the disadvantage of this active learning is also very important to concentrate on, to understand. It is not conducive to the teacher's planned lesson. That sometimes due to the activity based or the more activity involved in particular lesson, the teacher or the students get diverted from the content which is supposed to be delivered, and it becomes distracted, and the information which is shared at particular time may not be maximum but the depth of the knowledge will be high when the students are involved in active learning. Whereas in passive learning, the advantage is the teacher can give more information to the student. The teacher has a high control over the environment, and she can or he can give organized presentation of the material. In passive learning, the disadvantage is the students become diverted, disengaged. The knowledge which they gain might be superficial because they don't actively involve in the lesson. And the feedback which we get through this one is very much minimal. So now, these all, as I told you already, these are the difference between the active and the passive learning. The active learning connects to the world. Passive learning connects to their own life inside and outside the school only. Active learning is a individual's responsibility, student's responsibility, whereas passive learning becomes teacher's responsibility and the student avoids taking the responsibility. Active learning, motivates the children and it creates strong intrinsic motivators, which we saw yesterday. And the passive learning creates externally motivated, that is, extrinsic motivation is involved in passive learning. Here, the students prepare for the class, whereas in passive learning, the student comes unprepared to the class. Active learning, it is interested and it is open-minded. Closed in passive learning, it is closed-minded and intolerant of the students may not accept the open ideas, or they may not appreciate the ideas which is shared by the fellow students, or there may not be any rooms for a discussion of new ideas. Coming to again, when we see in active learning, 90% of the content taught is understood, whereas in passive learning, less than 50% of the content was only remembered. So 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, and 30% of what they see is only observed by the students. The learning outcomes is very feeble in case of passive learning. Whereas in active learning, more than 70 to 90% of learning outcome is observed because the students analyze, define, create, evaluate, synthesize, and they go for the higher order thinking cell. As a summary, active and passive learning are different methodologies for acquiring knowledge in the learning process. Active learning is student-centered, while the passive learning is mainly teacher-focused or teacher-centered. Now, in 21st century, the modern learning advocates active learning methodologies, which involves more creativity and more understanding and more innovation. There are advantages and disadvantages in both active and passive learning. both can be used perfectly if we understand each method and apply this according to the situation. Thank you.